All right, so we are recording. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this QuickStart webinar. My name is Mario Sanchez, and I'm part of the Sumo Learn team here at Sumo Logic. We run anything from anything that has to do with enabling you guys to use Sumo. So documentation, community, training. And as you notice here, this QuickStart webinar prepares you to become a Sumo Pro user, which is the level 1 certification. And I would highly encourage you guys to try that out. Let me switch over to our website, and this is probably where most of you went here to the virtual live courses, and you got registered through here. If you notice, this is the first of 3 sessions, QuickStart webinar using Sumo and setting up Sumo. This one is going to show you the breadth of what we can do. Using Sumo kind of dives deeper into how to do a lot of the stuff that I will show you today. And setting up Sumo is for those administrators who are looking to set up the data collection and optimize your system. Perhaps you want to automate your deployment and whatnot. But what I wanted to show you is that in addition to these 3 courses, we have certification that corresponds to each one of those courses. So for today's webinar, which is the QuickStart webinar, that prepares you, that webinar plus the tutorial prepare you for this level 1 Sumo Pro user. And there's another webinar that prepares you for level 2 and a third one for level 3. And they're all paired up with either hands-on labs or tutorials. And once you go through those, I would highly encourage you to take the exam, and you'll be surprised that you actually know a lot more than you thought of as you start going through these certifications. All right, so with that said, you are all muted, as you know, just to avoid distractions. But if you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A tab that you have so that you can ask questions through Zoom. So we're going to cover 5 basic steps to becoming a Sumo Pro user. The first one is, all right, how does Sumo Logic help me? What's the end game? What's the end result? And what I'll do is I'll show you a demo of how a lot of our customers are using it, an example with a fake customer, but I'll show you how they're using metrics and logs to monitor and troubleshoot in their environments and get to the root causes. And then I'm going to start diving into how that was put together. What data is available for me to analyze? How can I search that data? How can I parse it? How can I analyze it? And once I have something that I like and that I'm analyzing my data, how can I start monitoring that? How can I look for trends? How can I keep an eye on these critical events or outliers to start understanding how to use Sumo with that? And last but not least, we're going to talk about what's the next step for you guys. All right, so with that said, I mentioned it before, but there's quite a few tutorials to help you through this. The UI actually has a Learn tab, as you're seeing here, and that Learn tab is where you'll find the tutorials themselves. But if not, you can always go to our site, help.sumologic.com. And there is also a training environment. You have access, the exact same environment that I will be using today to show you some examples. That you have access to that same environment using this username and password. I will share these slides as well as this recording with you guys for future reference as well. Okay, so with that said, you can also, if you have questions past this webinar, you can join the conversation in our community, or you can join the conversation on Slack. Again, all this that I'm talking about, you have access through the UI. For those of you who have already seen Sumo, you'll notice that there is a Learn tab here right next to your Home tab. And that Learn tab has all this that I've been talking about. It has links to previous videos. Perhaps you want a quick intro to search. You want a quick intro to Livetail. It also has cheat sheets, documentation, support, what's new, community, training, and it has the tutorials that I was talking about before. All right. So with that said, encouraging to take the exams. Let's get started. How does Sumo Logic help me? Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a monitoring and troubleshooting demo, which allows me to look at my metrics, meaning how I monitor my system, and then look at the logs, which is how do I go and find out the root cause for something. So let's say that I have some alerts set up that I get through either PagerDuty or perhaps I'm getting alerts through Slack, or it could just be basic email. But I'm getting an alert through Sumo that is notifying me of a critical event. What I'm going to do in this demo is I'm going to dive into my metrics. I'm going to start looking at my dashboards, and the metrics help me identify the what is going on in my environment. So think of it as the symptoms, right? What's happening? Why am I? In my case, I'm going to start seeing some failed bookings in my travel site. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the, I'm going to switch from monitoring, which is monitoring my metrics, to troubleshooting in my logs to identify the why. Why is something happening in my environment? So you'll see me pivot from looking at a high-level dashboard to start looking into my metrics to then dive into my logs themselves. So for this, I'm going to be using a fake site called Travel Logic, but you can imagine this is a traveling site. So I could say book flight from San Francisco to LAX, for example, and search the flights that I want and all that good stuff, and eventually purchase that ticket and all that good stuff. Actually, I'll just quickly go through the motions, enter my credit card, and eventually pay. Right. So if I am ops or DevOps in my organization, I probably want to keep an eye on all this stuff. This is very similar to any modern app that is out there. Most likely you guys have some sort of a modern app in your organization. And as you know, you've got services in the back end, you've got containers, and you want to keep an eye on all this stuff, right? So what I've done is I've created this operational overview dashboard that allows me to keep an eye on all these different services. If you are, for example, an AWS workshop, then you might have your ELBs, this would be RDS, here's my 500 ELBs, but I don't have to be an AWS workshop. This could be anything. Here is an example of a dashboard that is gathering information from all these different sources. Let me refresh that, because right before starting this, I inserted some errors into this dashboard, into my application. So either I could have received an alert through Slack. I have a Slack sending an alert to my travel ops channel, or I have this dashboard on my operations center, and all of a sudden I start seeing a lot of yellows and reds, and this should alert me that something is going on, right? Again, this dashboard is high level, showing me all my different services. I have here my service nodes, my Redis cache, my job queue, my admin UI. Here it looks like my checkout service has 1.8 thousand errors. So a lot of errors happening when people are trying to check out. Remember in my Travel Logic where you go here and you try to pay? What's happening is people cannot pay. They're not being able to check out, and that's not good for our business, because we make money when people try to pay, right? So what I can do is, the way that I've designed these dashboards is I can click on, well, before I just dive into the demo, let me show you that any of these, you can see a little more detail. You can expand them. You can even go and look at the query behind. Actually, this is a drill down, but you can look at the queries that are underneath some of these dashboards. So, for example, I can go in here and see the query that actually created this dashboard and look at the actual data that was pulled in to look at that stuff. But we'll get to that in a little bit. I just wanted to show you that these dashboards essentially are pulling all this data and serving up all these, in this case, thresholds of red and green. So I'm going to click on this checkout. And what it's going to do is it's going to open this new Travel Logic Services Detail dashboard. Let me just refresh it for us here. And what this dashboard is showing me is, let's start on the top left-hand side. So this is a little bit of detail on the services themselves. Let's expand this one called bookings. What this one is showing me is that for the most part, I was pretty successful in terms of bookings. These are successful bookings. If you notice this, where my mouse is right now, I had about 71 bookings. I had a few dips, and that's, maybe not that abnormal. I'm still getting a lot of bookings. That might just be timing of when people are clicking. I have a few spikes as well. But the bad part that I can identify here is that all of a sudden, sometime around 1 o'clock, I'm Eastern time, so sometime around 12:58 or so, I started having a drop in my successful bookings and a jump in my failed bookings. So these orange ones are showing me the fails in terms of bookings. So again, these are the metrics. This is the monitoring of keeping an eye on what my system is doing. So not good. From a business perspective, I'm losing money. People are not being able to pay. They're going to other travel sites to book their travel. And that's definitely not where I want to be. If I look at this bottom one, this is showing me errors. It's putting the last 7 days into one same frame so that I can see the errors that I've had. So errors today is orange. It's showing me that it has a lot of errors right now. It's capturing a lot of errors from my logs. What I can also see is that this is not necessarily a trend. It doesn't look like all the time at this time of the day I have these errors. It does look like about 7 days ago I was having these kinds of errors as well. This happens to be because this is a demo instance, and I was running this demo about 7 days ago around this time again. But if you imagine what you get to see here is kind of like a trend over the last 7 days. Was this stuff happening over the last 7 days, or is this something new to today? And this orange line is kind of showing me that just today I have these errors. I also see from this one here, my gateway latency. So things were pretty good, and then all of a sudden I had a spike, and this is showing me kind of the outlier. This big bubble here is there because I had an outlier all of a sudden. So this pink triangle is showing me that something was out of the norm. Also, I had a huge spike here in the delta in terms of my latency, and down here at the bottom, I'm starting to see errors by node. So clearly, a whole bunch of errors are showing up for certain nodes. In this case, it looks like it's for a travel checkout node. 64F something or other. And this one is also a travel checkout node that is having errors. Whereas if I look at these other nodes, this is a, let's see, this is a travel worker node, and this is a travel worker node. These are not having errors, whereas these two certainly started having a lot of errors. So you start seeing how I'm using these dashboards that have a combination of metrics and of logs, these different panels that are showing me my monitoring troubleshooting so I can start finding out what's going on. Look at this one over here in the top right-hand side. This is showing me CPU and total memory. Let me expand this for just a little bit here. So it looks like everything was okay. Well, two things. One is this is showing me memory, which memory seems okay. This green dotted line seems to be okay. But CPU seems like everything was okay until about 12:59, and then all of a sudden I had this huge spike. Again, if I put my mouse right over those lines, it looks like it was my travel checkout node. So CPU is having, I'm having some sort of CPU spike on those travel checkout nodes. So it's giving me a little bit more information, and you know, you can dive a little more. Like I can focus on a particular piece of the graph as I'm doing here if I wanted to as well, just to see that there really was a big spike. It was pretty obvious from here anyway, but just showing you some of the functionality. So here's what I'm going to do. Clearly something is going on in my environment. CPU is spiking. Let me go to the back end. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the back end of the system to try to find out a little more about this. And again, remember, this is the monitoring troubleshooting part of it. This is what you want to get to eventually. You want to have dashboards like this and alerts that are telling you what's going on within your environment. So I'm gonna toggle off memory because memory is really not giving me any issues. So that clearly shows me it shows me the CPU a little better. And there's that spike again. What I would love to do is, great, I know that something's going on. I have a big CPU spike on those travel checkout nodes. Wouldn't it be pretty cool if I could see the logs that were happening around that same time? Because if I get to see the logs and the logs have some sort of errors and I can correlate these, then I know what's causing my issue. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Down here in this little red box, I have the ability to look for my logs, for logs for anything, but I'm going to be smart enough. And since I know it's already travel checkout, I'm going to look for the travel checkout nodes. So I'm going to use something called metadata, and I'll talk a little more about this later on. But essentially, we tag every single log message that comes into Sumo. We tag it with 5 different metadata tags. It's just a way to search them later on. And so today I'm going to use the source category, and I'm going to look for something that is for my customer support team, and I'm going to look for travel checkout. So it's saying, give me all the messages, give me all the log messages that are tagged customer support team travel checkout for the same time period, right? I was looking for the last 60 minutes. So let's just look for that. I'm going to run this query, and it's going to go back, and it's going to come back with a whole bunch of messages in here. And what it's telling me is, listen, I have a lot of messages. Then all of a sudden, I didn't really have that many messages, and then I had a lot other messages going on. What would be more interesting is, what if I search for those messages that have the word error in it? That probably would be a little more interesting for me because I really want to know only those. And check it out. There it is. All of a sudden, like around 12:59 again, around the same time I had the big spike, it looks like I did have a lot of messages with the word error in it. So bingo, I can now go look at those error messages and start identifying what the issue is, right? Pretty cool. So as most of you guys have done in the past, you go and you look at your messages, which by clicking on this little box or any of these in reality, I could go look for those messages. And I can start seeing the errors themselves. It says in this case, I had some level name error. This one is sort of getting some server certificate, SSL3 certificate error, some other error over here. But as many as you guys, as some of you have in the past, looking at errors is kind of daunting. Like there's a lot of information here. If it was just a couple of errors, it'd be easy to identify what was going on. But it looks like there's quite a few errors, not just only in this little square. Look, there's 352 here. There are 500 here, and so on. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you another cool tool that we have to help you distill what kind of error really is meaningful to you. So what I'm going to do is, instead of just clicking on that little box, I'm going to do a shift click. And that is going to open Sumo Logic's log management area, where I can now start searching through my logs here, all the error messages. Again, it really opened just the same query, right? It opened the same query for source category equals CS travel checkout, for the word error itself, for that same time frame. But what I'm going to do is I am going to use this little animal here called log reduce. And what log reduce does is, I like to call it the easy button, because what it's doing right now is it's going and looking at all those 60 minutes worth of data, and it's coming back and saying, listen, let me distill all that stuff, and let me just tell you what are the things that are going on. But before, so I ran this, and you notice that now it took all those 352 messages, and it said, listen, about 179 of those messages are just very similar. Yes, transaction ID is going to be different, and probably the date is going to be different, but the structure of the message is pretty similar. So it starts identifying all these signatures for me, which make it a lot easier. But the error that caused this is probably not going to happen only in that time frame. It probably is going to happen before. So I'm just going to go grab like 60 minutes worth of data, and tell you what, I'm even going to search for everything that including those that don't have the word error, because whatever is causing my issue probably doesn't have the word error in it, right? Something happened, and then I started getting all these errors. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to run the same thing for a bigger time frame without the word error, and let's look at what all comes out of this. And look at this. It's starting to count, in this case, about 28,000 messages. It just went through 28,000 messages, and it came back and said, look, Mario, about 5,000 of those messages are this. Another 4,000 look like this. So it starts helping me get rid of that noise and weed out a lot of that noise. Probably more interesting to me is to reverse this count. What are those things that are happening only a few times, right? If you remember, I was getting that SSL certificate issue. So it sounds like there's some sort of SSL issue with some issue with the certificate itself. And if I look here at those that are happening only a couple of times, I probably find the culprit right here. Look at this guy. Travel Logic app starting cluster. It's starting my checkout node, my cluster checkout. And what I noticed is that it started version 1.14 dev. So what this tells me is that someone in the organization deployed the development version of our code into a production environment, which most likely has the wrong SSL certificate, which is causing all these issues with the SSL certificate, which is causing the CPU issue. If you remember, if we go back to this query, which is, sorry, to this query, which is causing the CPU issue, which is probably what is causing, it trickles all the way up, and it's causing my bookings to fail. So if I go back to this screen, what you just saw me do is you saw me look at some issue or be alerted on some issue, dive into, start monitoring what's going on using my metrics and identifying the what is happening, and then looking at the relevant logs to troubleshoot and identify the why this is happening, finding out the culprit and going back. Now, just to complete the circle, what I would most likely do, if this is an issue that happened and I clearly saw that someone was deploying development code in my environment, just to close the circle, what I would do for the next round is on this initial dashboard. You remember this is where I started the operational overview dashboard. I would, and I cheated, I've already created it, but I've created here a little panel that is showing me the deployed versions so that I can see if someone has deployed development code in my environment, which in this case they have, or I could create an alert for that that tells me, hey, something is not correct, you have to go and take a peek, so that I can mitigate these kinds of issues in the future. All right, I failed to mention, but if you have any questions, feel free to bring them up through the Q&A panel. I'm more than happy to answer questions as we go, but we'll also have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. But if you have any questions, feel free to just put them out there. Okay, so that gives you a good sense of how to use Sumo Logic for monitoring and troubleshooting, how to use metrics, how to use logs, and use these together. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to get started. So there's three main areas from a Sumo Logic data flow perspective. So I'm giving you the 30,000-foot view. The first is you've got to get that data into Sumo, and we're not going to cover that. There's another webinar called Setting Up Sumo that focuses specifically on data collection. But assuming that we've got our data within Sumo, then we learn how to search. We learn how to analyze that data using operators. And this is where we're going to be spending most of our time today. How do I search? How to analyze? And then once you've analyzed that data, how do I keep an eye on it for the future? How do I create dashboards? How do I create alerts so I can monitor this kind of data as well? So I promise we won't be spending too much time on data collection, but I just want to cover a couple of little things because it's going to make our life a lot easier when we search and analyze, right? So sending data to Sumo is fairly straightforward. There's two main ways that you can do it. One is cloud to cloud. So everything on this top, on the top of this graphic is a cloud to cloud integration. For example, sending data from AWS. You send data through the S3 bucket, or you can send cloud to cloud collection from Akamai, like CDF or WAF services over through HTTPS. Or we also have some APIs to SaaS and PaaS platforms, for example, Office 365 and Google Apps. So that's one way, cloud-to-cloud integration. The second way is to use a collector. So you could have a collector on installed on your machines, as it's shown here. This little plus sign is a Sumo collector that is installed on each one of these machines. They collect your logs and send them over to Sumo. Or if you have a centralized infrastructure already, we can take advantage of that. So in this case, we have a central collector, and then we use SSH. We use SSH or WMI, send that data over the collector and onto Sumo. And we could do the same thing with network devices, firewalls, routers, and the like. We can syslog that data over and then onto Sumo Logic. So just keep in mind, we can grab just about any data, whether it's structured or unstructured data in your logs, and we can index it as we're getting that data. The last thing I want to mention about getting data into Sumo is, from a logs perspective, every single message that we get, we tag with these 5 metadata tags. Remember, I used it in the demo. So we identify which collector that data came through, which host it came through, the source name, which is the name of the path of the log file that data came from, the source. So for example, if you're sending Apache data, is it Apache Access or is it Apache Error data that you're sending us? And then a source category, which can be configured freely, meaning that it can be anything that you want. So we have some best practices around this, and we cover this in Setting Up Sumo. And you'll see me use a lot of the best practices in a little bit. But we more often than not suggest that you use source category when you're searching your data. So I'm about to show you how to do exactly that. Let's say that you're brand new to Sumo and you've already have your system set up, it's got data in it, but you don't even know what data is available to you. Someone said, hey, can you please go analyze our Apache web server data? I want to find out what's going on with our web operations, and I want to find out if we're getting a lot of 404s and if we're getting, what's going on with our with our web servers, right? So the first thing is you don't know how to find out if even that Apache data made it into Sumo or not. Right, so I'm going to show you two methods of exploring how to find out that data. The first one's pretty straightforward. You go into your instance, and by the way, I'm using this training instance, which is the exact same instance you guys all have access to. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under Manage Data. And under Manage Data, I'm going to go to Collection, and this is going to show me all the collectors that have been set up. This is a training environment. I use it for a lot, so I've got a lot of collectors. Most of you probably will have less, but some of you might have a whole bunch of collectors, especially if you automate it through a tool like a Chef or a Puppet. But you can see here that I'm getting Apache data, I'm getting Artifactory data, CloudWatch, AWS services data, and so on. You could always search it. Let's say that I want to find out if I'm getting Apache data because that's what my boss asked me to go find. And I can see that, yeah, there's Apache Tomcat data that is coming through. There is some file uploads from the tutorials that a lot of you have actually gone through, or your peers have. There's some labs that are coming in here as well, and so on. And the interesting thing about this is that when you find what you're trying to get, it shows you the name of the collector, remember? The collector name, that metadata tag is the loggen data. It shows you the source name. It shows you the source category. So this is the important one that I want to show you. If I look for data where source category equals lab Apache Access, I'm going to be finding all my Apache Access data. And I can just click on this little icon here, by the way, and it's going to launch a query, and it's going to search for all that query that happens to have a source category lab Apache Access. So that's one way to find out if your data is, to find out what data has been brought into Sumo. I'm going to show you another cheeky way of how to do this as well. I'm going to run and say, give me everything for the last, let's say, 5 minutes, and then I'm going to count by source category. And why do I count by source category? Because I want to find out how to search for that data later on. So let me try that. I'm going to go back in this here. I'm going to open a new log search and say, give me everything, and then I'm going to pipe that data, meaning all those results, and then I'm going to say count by source category. Remember, source category is just metadata. And I'm just going to look for the last 5 minutes. And since there is no choice here, you can figure it out that minus 15M is 5 minutes. So I'm going to do minus 3M. And that's going to give me 3 minutes worth of data. And now I can see that I've got Artifactory data, Zscaler data, travel products, Symantec, Snort, and so on and so forth. So if I wanted to search for, let's say, AWS SES data, all I have to do is say, I'm going to go back to this query and say where source category equals, and then I put the source category that I'm looking for, and I will find all that SES data that I was looking for in there. Sounds good? All right, if I don't see any questions, I'm going to continue. Why do we suggest source category and some of these best practices that you're seeing here, in this case, labs/AWS/SES? The reason for that is because you could do stuff like this. You could say, give me all labs AWS data. I don't care if it's CloudTrail data, as in this case, or if it is ELB data, as in this case, or S3 data, as it is in this case. Let me make my screen a little bit bigger for you guys. There we go. So you notice how I can use wildcards in the source category. So we have some naming conventions that we suggest for source category for that specific reason, right? So I could also say Apache star, and that would bring labs Apache Access and lab Apache error data over to me as well. Okay, so let's get back to this. So I've shown you how you can go and find out what kind of data is in your system. Now, continuing with my story, I know now that I have Apache Access data, which is great because that's exactly what I needed to analyze. My boss asked me to find out what's going on with my web servers and where am I getting the most hits from, and am I getting a lot of client errors and server errors and all that good stuff. So I don't know yet. The data's in there. But I really don't know. I can look at this and I can see some 302s, some 200s. I can see some stuff in here, but I need to start analyzing. So what I'm going to show you right now is how to go about and start analyzing your data. Well, The good news for all of you on this call is that there might be some shared content. Perhaps someone in your organization already did that work. Let's say that there's someone else who already started analyzing the Apache data. There's no reason for me to recreate the wheel. Let me go find out if there's any shared content out there, which means that people can create a query and share it. They can create a dashboard and share it, which is awesome, right? I'm going to go in here and talk a little bit about these icons that are here on the left-hand side. Let me start with this one. The first one is anything that I have recently viewed is going to be in here, as well as anything that I have recently opened is going to be here, and I can switch it to anything that has been recently shared with me. I can see here. This icon is all my favorites. Anything that is my favorite. This icon here is anything that is personal, the stuff that I have created. And this guy right here is anything that has been shared with me. I can browse by creator. So for example, I can go see anything that Stacy has created. So if I had 20 people in my organization and they all had shared something, they would be listed here, and I can go see exactly what is it that they have shared. In this case, Stacy has shared an account management overview dashboard, right? Or I can also switch to all shared content view, which shows me everything that is in here, everything that has been shared with me, not just by creator, including anything that the administrator is recommending for me to take a peek at. And we'll learn in a future session, we will learn how to set this up. How can I, as an administrator, recommend stuff for others? But for now, just know that I can have stuff recommended for me, or I could recommend stuff for other people. I'm going to show you another view of this, and that view is in this guy here. If I click on this little icon, this shows me, let me close a couple of tabs. This shows me everything that is out there. So, excuse me, I can go and search anything that has the word Apache. Remember, I'm trying to figure out, has there already been someone, has someone already searched through all the Apache data and kind of done a couple of these things? And bingo. It looks like yes. Look, there's an Apache overview. There's an Apache visitors locations. Let me go click on some of these and see if there's any data in those. But the good news to me is that I haven't done anything. All I'm doing right now is looking at anything that has been out there, and I've already have a lot of answers. I can keep an eye on where most of my data is coming in from. I can see if I just wanted to focus in the US, where are most of my hits coming from. I can see a breakdown of visitors by country over time, visitors by US state over time as well. So I'm starting to get a lot of data without me even knowing how Sumo Logic necessarily works. Again, how was I able to do that? Because I went and looked for any content that has been shared that has the word Apache in it, which is pretty smart of me, so I don't have to start from scratch. I'll just show you one more that it's over here. We'll look at this one called the web server operations, and that one most likely will show me some of the operations of a web server itself. So am I getting a lot of 400s? Am I getting a lot of 500s, which are client and server errors? The top 10 robots out there, server errors over time, top 5 clients causing 400 errors, non-200 response codes, and so on. So pretty cool. I didn't have to do a whole lot. I probably have already a lot of answers for the questions that my boss had, and I can start now sharing this with my boss. Here's the even better stuff, that I can take any of this data and I can tweak it to my needs. So let's take this one here, for example. Let's say that what I really wanted was, this is showing me server errors over time. And let's say that what I really wanted was client errors over time. Well, I can always click on this little icon. It's going to take me to the query behind it, which right now looks like a lot of gibberish. This is pretty hard because we don't know anything about this. And by the end of today, you will. But for now, we really don't know a lot about this. So I'm just going to look into this and say, okay, you know what? I'm just going to change these to 400s. And actually, you know what? I'm going to make it simple. Since there is another filter down at the bottom, this one here, I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to change where status code matches for something. And if I run that query now, again, I don't know what all this other stuff means, but I could figure it out that where status code matches for X is looking for client errors versus server errors, right? And there you go. Look, I've got my new dashboard. I've got 401s, 404s, 403s. My data is showing. This is awesome. I actually got exactly what I was looking for just by tweaking a very simple dashboard. And now I can save this as some other, as my own query. So I'm going to click on Save As and say client errors over time. And I can decide where to, I'm going to say Apache client errors over time in the description, if I want to add a little description. And I can put it in my own personal folder. I'm going to put it under this training folder under training queries and click on save. And I'm done. I've just created a whole new dashboard, a whole new query, which is pretty cool. And it actually serves exactly the purpose that I want. Okay, let me take a step back right now. So I've shown you that that you can go and find out a lot of this stuff that has been shared, right? I went into this guy here and I searched for anything that had the word Apache, and I can start looking at this stuff. I'm going to take a little tangent right now on this one that I just saved, right? Client errors over time. How do I know where it was saved and how to get to it? Remember, you can always go to your personal folder. And in your personal folder, you can follow where you put it. In my case, I put it under training queries, and then somewhere down here, there it is, client errors over time. Again, this same tree that I have here, I could have searched to do this. I could go, let me just search for everything. I could go to my personal folder, and in my personal folder, go to training, and under training, go to queries, and there is my client errors over time. So now I want to share this with my teams, and I want to share this with my boss as well, who's a person who was looking for it. So one of the things I can do in here, in addition to editing it, saving it, duplicating it, exporting it, deleting it, and moving it, and all that good stuff, is I have the ability to share. Remember, someone shared with me. It's only fit that I actually share with everybody else. So right now, I am the only user or role who has the ability to view this dashboard. I can specify people. Let's say that I wanted to share it with Stacy in particular, and I can say, okay, Stacy will have the ability to excuse me, to view this dashboard, or Stacy will have the ability to edit this dashboard, this query, or Stacy will have the ability to manage this. The difference between, excuse me, between edit and manage is that with edit, you can make some changes. With manage, you can delete as well. Excuse me, I just need a sip of water. So if you don't want anybody deleting your stuff, you most likely will not be granting manage access. So in my case, I'm going to grant Stacy some edit access to it as well. And there you go. That's how you go about, excuse me, adding people to this. I could have also, instead of selecting a person, I could have selected a role. I could say anybody who has a role of analyst will have the ability to do this kind of actions in here. Or I could have scrolled down a little bit here and look at some of my advanced options and said, oops, I needed to add someone in here to show the advanced options. Sorry about that. I'm going to show you these advanced options. I can say, I'm going to let all analysts edit this dashboard. And in addition to that, I'm going to allow them to grant view access to other users, or grant edit and view access to other users, or they cannot grant any access at all. So I'm even allowing them to do the granting that I'm doing here right now for other users as well. All right, so with that said, that's how you go about sharing your dashboards and sharing the data that you have. You can share with someone, or you can share it with roles, and you can share it just for them to view it, or you can share it for them to have access to it as well and edit it. Great, let's go back to where we were. So I've shown you that there could be some shared content. Let's say that nobody had looked at my Apache data. I ran my search, I looked for Apache stuff, and there was nothing. Nobody has ever, there is Apache data in Sumo Logic, but nobody has actually done any analytics on it. So the second thing I want to show you is apps. We actually have this catalog of apps, and think of it as out-of-the-box content. We've seen so many customers looking at Apache Data that we kind of have a good idea of what they're looking for. We've seen them looking for Amazon RDS metrics. We kind of know what they're looking for. So we've created a lot of best practices out-of-the-box content for a lot of these. Let me just close some of these dashboards to give us some space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the app catalog, and you notice we've got a whole bunch of apps here for a lot of the common sources that we've seen a lot of our customers look for. So if you're in Google Cloud, we've got a lot of stuff for you. If you're in AWS, we've got a lot of stuff for you as well. If you are in Azure, we're starting to develop a lot of these same apps for you as well. In my case, I happen to be looking for Apache, so I'm going to search. There it is, Apache. Here it is. So this app, if I add it to my library, it's going to install all these queries, and it's going to install all these apps as well for me, which is pretty cool, because then I don't have to do a lot of the creating queries myself. Let me show you how to do it. I'm going to click on Add to Library. And it says, okay, what do you want to name the app? I'm just going to call it Apache April, because I might have another one already installed from previous demos. And then it's asking me, how do I identify what your Apache data looks like? So it's asking for the name of my data. And I think it was Labs Apache Access. So let's just go here and search for Labs Apache. Oops, sorry about that. Here we go. So if I tell it my source category equals Labs Apache Access, that is exactly how it's going to identify how to match my data to the dashboards already exist. And I can even say, by the way, I want this to be put into my apps folder in here. And click on Add to Library. And what it's doing in the background is it's saying, okay, I'm going to give you a copy of all these dashboards. I'm going to give you a copy of all these queries, and I'm going to put the source category equals Lab Apache in front of it so that you have them. So notice, I'm in my library, in my personal folder under apps. Here's my folder called Apache April, and it copied or it installed all these queries for me. So let's just take one here, malicious URL requests. So here is a query. Again, don't worry about what all that means, but what the cool thing is that I can run it for the last 2 hours and find if I had any malicious queries in my environment. Similarly, I can go back to that same folder and look at some of the other dashboards that it installed. Let me do just that. I'm going to go back in here and open Traffic Insights, and what you see is I didn't do much. All I have done is installed this Apache Access app, and I'm starting to get a lot of information, a lot of analytics for my data. And looks like my okay, there we go. So I can see the top documents. So here are the URLs that are getting the most hit. Looks like my blog is probably one of the best, the most popular ones. I'm getting top referrers. So most of my referrers are coming from Sumo. I'm getting media types served. So most of the stuff are PNG files. I get top 10 search terms for popular search engines. So Sumo Logic and so on. So you notice how, again, without doing a whole lot, I was able to start getting a lot of the information I was looking for. Now, the thing that I usually say in here is that apps probably don't have everything that you need for a particular source. You might be looking for something very particular for your AWS Lambda. But what I can say is that we cover 80, if not 90 or 95% of the analytics that you're looking for in a source. So apps is always a great way to get started. And again, what I didn't show you was that for any of these, you can use it as a template to get started. So if I had my top referrers and I wanted to show more than 5 top referrers, easy peasy. I can go into the query behind it. You notice that it's saying limit by 5. I can say limit 10, run it, and now I'm going to get the top 10. Right? Makes sense? Okay. If there's no questions, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you what all this means. I'm going to show you how to start creating queries from scratch, because all this must mean something. And right now for you is just a whole bunch of text with different colors. So let me close a couple of these ones here, and let's try it out. So you saw. Let me hide this so that we have a little bit more real estate. So you saw me search for Lab Apache Access, right? I can search for a particular word in it as well. I can say, give me all the messages that have Lab Apache Access with the word Mozilla in it, right? So there you go. Here's all my messages that have the word Mozilla in it. I can choose different time frames. I can choose last 60 minutes, 15 minutes. If there's something that is not in here, I can always edit this and say, give me the last 45 minutes. Or I could even do stuff like that. Give me 15 minutes worth of data. But in this case, start 45 minutes ago and then 30 minutes ago. So it's only 15 minutes worth of data, but with a 30-minute offset. And that little blue bubble tells you exactly what time frame it's picking there. Okay, you can also go to custom and say, give me data from April 1st to April 5th. And for that, I want from 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. all the way to 5 a.m., for example. And so if that's what you want, you say apply. Here is the data. This is exactly what it's going to run for. And I can click on start and run that data. All right, so you can always use any of those. All right, let's keep it simple. Here is Lab Apache Access data. Again, you can use wildcards as well for your keywords. It doesn't have to be only for the source category itself. So how did I go about looking at, let's say, 400s versus 500s and all that good stuff? Well, the good news is that Apache Access is a fairly simple format that it has. It has an IP address, it has a couple of dashes, it has a date, and then it has some sort of action, and then it has URLs and all that stuff. I'm going to show you the easy way to parse out log messages, and then I'm going to show you a couple of other ways as well, so you can start seeing how to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this message as an example. I'm going to go from here all the way to the end and say, okay, what I want to do is I want to parse this selected text. I just want to use this thing as an example to parse this text. So great. Anything between the word get and the word HTTP, I'm going to extract that, and that's going to be my URL. So if you notice, what I'm doing is I'm just using this message as an example and choosing the fields that I want. That's my status code, and this guy here is my size. So I'm just giving them names, right? This one here would be my my refer, and to keep it simple, all this other stuff all the way to the end here, that is going to be my user agent. All right, agent. Oof, my goodness, agent. Here we go. All right. So now what I did is I put some placeholders. I gave him some names. I click submit. And what it did is it built, it built that statement for me. I could have done it myself, but it's so much easier to have the UI do it for you. So you notice, first it's going to go only find messages from Lab Apache Access that have the word Mozilla in it. And the results are going to be sent through this pipe onto this other operator that is going to parse those messages for me. And if I run that query now, you'll see those messages parsed. There you go. My message is still here on my right-hand side. But over to my left, there's user agent, there is URL, there is status code, there is size, refer, and all that good stuff. So the cool thing about that is that now I can say, all right, all those results, I only want to see where status code equals 404, for example. I should have done this. And that is going to bring back only those messages that have a status code of 404. So what I'm showing you right now is the parsing. Parsing is one of the key things you want to do because you want to start identifying or making sense or giving structure to your data. Before I continue down all this, once you parse all the stuff that you can do, let me talk about a few other parsing options. And to do that, I am going to go into documentation to make it to start pointing you guys to where all this stuff is. So if I go here under docs and say parse operators and search for these parsing operators, you will see that there's quite a few. What I just showed you is using an anchor. What I did is Apache has very predictable patterns. We know exactly how it is. So I'm using an anchor. I used the word, where is it? Where's that query? Here we go. I used the word get, and I used the word HTTP as anchors, and I said, give me anything that is in between those and call it the URL, and then look for space, and then give me anything after that with a space, and call that the status code. And I was able to do that because there is a very, very distinct pattern on how my my Apache logs look like. But what if I have variable patterns? What if my parents are my pattern? Not my parents, but my patterns are very variable. So I can use what we call regex, which most of you, if not everybody here, has used. Let me give you an example here. As a matter of fact, let me just copy and paste it. I'm going to show you this example. I'm going to paste it and then run through it. I'm going to grab it from here, go to my query, go to the next line, paste this, and run it. What this is saying is, listen, look for the following pattern. Look for something that is 1 to 3 digits, a period, another 1 to 3 digits, a period, 1 to 3 digits, a period. You get the point, right? Look for this pattern, which sounds like an IP address. And when you find it, store it in a field called IP address. And that's exactly what it did. Here's all my other fields, and there's IP address. So it just looked for a particular pattern, parsed it, and stored it in a field. And the really cool thing is I've shown you a couple of things. I've shown you that you can have multiple parse statements, and I show you that some of them could be anchor parsing, others could be parse regex. So it doesn't have to be exactly the same. You could have multiple variations of your parse statements in here. I'm just going to go back and complete this list for you. If you are sending us JSON formatted logs, guess what? We know what JSON looks like, so we can parse those out. Pretty straightforward. Key value, if you're sending us data that is in the format of name equals Mario, company equals Sumo Logic, we know what that looks like, so we can parse that out easily. CSV format, what if you're using some other, like say tab or colon? We have one called split, XML, and so on. So the short of the story is anything that you can send to us, we can parse, and we can start making sense of that data. And that's very, very key. You want to parse your data because that's how you're going to get to the next level. All right. So normally around this time, I get a question saying, hey, Mario, this is great, but does that mean that every time I'm looking for Lab Apache Access, I have to add these 2 lines in there? Because I'm always going to be parsing IP address. I always look for stuff based on IP address, or I always look for stuff based on status code. And the answer is no. The answer is you can create some rules to pre-parse this stuff for you. And those rules are called field extraction rules. If you look at here in the Parse Operators in the help, there's something called the field extraction rules. And that's exactly what field extraction rules do. They allow you to create some rules to manage all your fields that you extract. So let me show you how to do it. By the way, field extraction rules is something that only administrators can do. So if you're not an administrator, you'll have to work with your administrator to do that. But it's fairly straightforward to do it. You go under Manage, you go under Settings, and one of the things that you can do here is your field extraction rules. You can click the plus sign and say, I want to create a new rule. I want to create an Apache Access rule, for example. And then it says, okay, what's the scope of your data? Meaning, what data should I apply this to? And I can say, apply it to anything that is Apache Labs Apache Access. Or perhaps I want to apply it to everything, not just my labs, but my dev and my prod, all my environments, just apply that. You can do that here as well. And then in here, you can start writing whatever expressions you want to parse. So I could put my parse regex, I could put my parse anchor, and all that good stuff. But we also try to get you started. We know what Apache Access logs look like. So we have a template that you can use. And if you like it, you can use that template. There it is. It's going to parse IP address. It's going to parse method, URL, and all that good stuff for you. I'm not going to click on add because I conveniently have already built one in the past. Here's one here. I don't know why it has that name, but there it is. If I edit it so you can see how it was put together, it's exactly that. Source Apache Access, and it's doing this kind of parsing. So cool thing is, these fields have already been parsed. Look at this. I'm going to go back to our query, which is here. And I'm going to get rid of all this parsing that I had put together. I'm just going to run that query as it is. Let me get rid of this for some real estate. Over here on the left-hand side, we have what was called the field browser. And the field browser will show you any parsed fields. So there they are: IP address, message, refer, size, URL, status code. All those fields exist. So in reality, because there is a field extraction rule, I could do something like this, because status code is already a field that exists. So I can search by status code and run this kind of stuff. Pretty cool, huh? All right, so what I'm showing you is parsing, the ability to start parsing your data. I should have, by the way, continued with these slides. These slides are meant to, if you're whenever I deliver this face-to-face, we stop here, we try a few of these labs. Again, I would highly encourage you to try these labs. These are the exact same ones that are posted in the certification suggestion. I talked a little bit now about how to start creating your queries. I've shown you that you can search by metadata and by keywords. I've just shown you how to start parsing, right? So you want to start creating those parse statements, but more importantly, you want to create those field extraction rules. Let's talk a little bit about how you can filter your data. Now you can use your where clause, like I showed you before. You can start using if operators, right? If status code in 501 or 502, then error. Otherwise, okay, that's code type. So you can start really filtering that data. You can start aggregating that data as well. You can do your counts, like I showed you, count by status code, or perhaps let's do this one, average size by source IP. Let's say that we want to find out. I'm going to comment this one out and do. Oops, I just ran it. And let's say that I wanted to do average size by IP address. Right, here's a good one. Oh. This one is showing me the average message size. Did I get, address, here we go. The average message size by IP address in here, right? Okay, yeah. Oh, looks like I have a question from Fred. So the question from Fred is, does having many field extraction rules slow down Sumo? Again, the question is, does having many field extraction rules slow down Sumo? So let me go to the UI just to make sure everybody understands. So his question is, Fred is saying, listen, this is awesome. I would love to use field extraction rules, but I'm going to start creating these, but is that going to slow it down? And actually, on the contrary, Fred, it actually makes your queries a lot faster, because now you're not having to query, you're not having to parse at the time that you're querying. What happens is, field extraction rules act or work on the data as the data is getting ingested. So as data is coming in, it says, oh, look, here I have a Labs Apache Access data. I'm going to parse it. I'm going to index it, and it's ready for you, for everybody in your organization to start using it. So in reality, it's the other way around, Fred. Field extraction rules are great because then you don't have to be parsing when you're querying your data. That data has already been indexed, and you can search your data a lot quicker than before. All right. Great. Yeah, you're welcome, Fred. Perfect. Keep those questions coming, by the way. All right. So so I was talking about aggregation of your data, and I'm going to show you a little example here. As a matter of fact, let me show you an example that does a little bit of metadata and keywords. It parses, filters, aggregates, and then onto formatting some of that data as well. So I'm going to go back to my UI, and let's say that I was looking for count by status code like I did before. So here's what I have. This is my production environment, so this is good. A lot of 200s is exactly what I want. That's nice. But there's quite a few 404s in here, right? There's even quite a few 500s. More of these 404s, so client errors. I want to find out, are people having these client errors? Since I looked at 15 minutes worth of data, let's look at for a little more, 60 minutes worth of data. Are all these happening on minute number 60, or were these happening across evenly, right? All these 404s. I'm going to introduce a new operator. Unfortunately, I can't show you all of them, but I'm going to show you one here called time slice. And the cool thing about time slice is that it allows me to look at trends over time. So in this case, as the name suggests, it allows me to slice my time into different pieces. So I'm going to choose 5 minutes. So I had 60 minutes worth of data, and by slicing it into 5 minutes, that means I'm going to get 12 slices, each of 5 minutes. So I'm going to look for now I'm going to count by status code, but I'm also going to count by time slice. And you notice that I put an underscore right in front of my time slice. And the reason for that is because the result of any operator, like in this case, when I did a count, the result of count is an underscore count. Unless I give it another name, which I'll show you later on how to do, it just gives me that underscore name. So if I use time slice and I want to count by time slice, the result is an underscore time slice. So look at these results. This is cool. What I'm seeing now is I can see that at 10 o'clock, I had, for status code 302, I had 845. And then at 10, for status code 500, I had this many. And for status code 200, I had this many, and so on. It's a little hard to read. So I'm going to show you another operator. This is transpose. And what transpose does is very similar to Excel. It allows you to turn a list into a table, or this columns into a matrix, if you will. So transpose is what I meant to do. I'm going to say that my rows are my time slice, and my columns is my status code. And look at what happens here. It's going to switch my view. Oh, did I write something wrong? Transpose status code. Status code. There we go. Okay. So now what I see here is that it's a lot easier to read. At 10, for this status code, I had this many. For this status code, I had this many, and so on. So this really helps me look at trends over time. Remember, I was worried about my 404s. Were they happening all at one particular minute, or are they spread evenly across? And it looks like the case that they are spread evenly. Excuse me. So if you notice, I have these in here. And now the great thing is that from a query like this to a graph is as simple as this. You can just choose a line, or you can choose a bar graph, or whatever you decide to do in here. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go through all of these, but maybe I'll pick a few here. Let's see. Let's make this, let's say that I want to highlight my 404s, but if you notice, my 200s are kind of overpowering my query. So I'm going to get rid of that one, and let me also get rid of the 304s. So here's all my other queries. If I wanted to remove this altogether, I'm going to show you two ways of doing it. I could do something like, I could do where status code equals 304 or status code equals 200, right? But since I don't want those, I could just put a bang right in front of it, where status code is not equal to 304 and not equal to 200. So that is going to remove them from the graph altogether, right? That's the simple way. I can just have a little where clause. But the better way of doing this, and this is kind of going to the same question that Fred was asking before, because we have field extraction rules, and these fields already exist, I actually can move this to my top line. I can say, and not status code 304 and 200. Why is this better? Well, the reason why this is better is because this is going to do a lot more filtering right on the first line. So then there's a lot less messages that are going to be passed on to the next line, and then to the next line, and then to the next line. So the more filtering you can do right at the top, the better, right? Just keep that in mind. The more filtering you do here, the better your queries are going to perform. So having your field extraction rules so you can take advantage of those fields is excellent. All right, just for kicks, I'm going to show you very briefly how to tweak a little bit these graphs in here, since we'll cover this more for those joining tomorrow. I'm going to turn this column chart by clicking on Settings into a combo chart. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab those 404s, which are the ones that I really care to highlight, and I'm going to plot those in a line. And I'm going to say save. So now what you're seeing is all my status codes, but my 404 shows in a line. So I can somewhat highlight that status code. And I can now say, all right, save as. And I'm going to call it, let's call it Apache 404 highlight. Why not? Apache 404 highlight. And I can save it in my folder under my training queries or wherever I want to, and click on save. And there you go. I'm done. I just saved my query, and this is something that I can again go back and search and share with other folks in my organization. Right? Cool. So what I've shown you is how to go start from scratch and start building, searching for metadata, searching for keywords, looking to parse your data. Very, very important. How to filter it, aggregate it, format it. Of course, I can't show you everything, but what I will point out is if you go to the Home tab and to that Learn tab, there is a cheat sheet here, which is super, super handy. This operator cheat sheet shows you all the different operators that we have, and it breaks it by function. So here's all my parsing operators. Remember I showed you these? Parse anchor, parse regex, key value, CSV, and you can always click in here and it'll take you to the page and show you even more how to use it in examples. But here's my other operators, aggregation operators. I have search operators in here as well. So a whole bunch of different operators that'll depending on what your use case, what is it that you're trying to do. I just don't have the time today to be able to show you all these operators, unfortunately. But at least I wanted to point you in the right direction. Okay. So one other thing I want to show you. A lot of you guys know tail. Obviously, you tail your logs, but a lot of you might not have access to the production environment to be able to tail your logs. Well, we have something within Sumo called live tail. Let me show you how that works. So I'm going to cheat and just grab this here for just a second so I don't have to type it again. I can open a live tail session. And what that allows me to do is I can tail things using the metadata. So in this case, I'm using source category equals lab Apache Access. Guess what this is doing? This is going not just to one web server. This is going to all my web servers because they were all configured with lab Apache Access. So it's going to all my web servers, and it's grabbing all the data from it. I can even do in Mozilla so that it only grabs those things that have the word Mozilla in it. I can highlight the keywords that I care for. Let's say Mozilla, error, oops, 404, I misspelled that. Let me just change that. Error. And you get the point. So I can stop this. I can scroll up and down. I can search through my logs. So this is a way of actually tailing your logs through our Sumo Logic UI. Some of you are already thinking, man, it'd be great if I could just do it from my console, from my terminal. And the answer is yes, we actually have a CLI for that. So let me just go find it, CLI for LiveTail. We do have a command line interface. You'll have to download a client from GitHub. I think the link is somewhere around here. You'll have to do a little handshake to make sure that that you have the right access key and access ID and that kind of stuff. But then you'll be able to run stuff like this. You'll be able to say LiveTail source category equals lab Apache Access, so on and so forth. You could even do stuff like this. LiveTail source category equals lab Apache Access, pipe that, and then grep it and even push it into an out.txt file if you want to as well. So you'll be able to combine some of the things that you already do in your Unix environment with some of these queries as well. So pretty cool. All right, and again, if you're a developer and you don't have access to those production environments, here is a nice, easy way to start getting access to some of that stuff as well. Okay, so what I won't have time to cover today, and we certainly will tomorrow, is these advanced analytics. So GeoLookup, Outlier, Predict. These are more advanced operators that are log specific, if you will, or monitoring and troubleshooting is specific, if you will. I will cover Outlier only because it's a good one to show. But and then in the demo, I showed you how log reduce works. But for those of you joining tomorrow, we'll definitely cover these in depth, and I'll point you to some labs that you can try. But for now, let me talk a little bit about Outlier, and I'll do that through an example. I'm going to go back to the UI. And I'm going to cheat a little bit because what I'll do is I'll open a query that already exists. Let me close LiveTail here for just a second. I'm going to go to this thing here. I'm going to go to all the shared stuff. There's a folder called training that has been shared that has some queries. And I'm going to grab this example called the Outlier example. Let me run it first, and then I'll show you what it does. So it creates something like this. if I plot it on a diagram, what this is showing me is it's showing me a count of my 404s. I'm looking only for those things that have a status code of 404. Then I'm time slicing it by 1 minute, and then I'm doing a count by time slice, right? So these 3 lines are the exact same thing that we were doing before. Count all these 404 by time slice. But then what I'm doing is I'm using this outlier operator on that server error count. I just gave it a better name. I called it server error count instead of just being called count. I use this outlier operator to say, okay, plot this and show me when, according to data in the past, when do I have an outlier? And the data in the past is measured by these guys in here. These other things say, Windows says, how far back do you want me to go? And how many data points should I look in the past to find out what the standard deviation should be now? And if I say 5, it's saying that for this data point here, it looked at 5 data points in the past, and that's how it identified what the threshold should be. So if you notice, the blue line is the actual count. The light blue shaded area around it are the threshold, the standard deviations. And I'm using a standard deviation of 2. Let me choose a standard deviation of 4. And you'll notice that then that area is going to be a lot bigger. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of less stuff outside of the standard deviation. As a matter of fact, I only have 1 pink triangle because only 1 data point is outside of that standard deviation, right? Because I made my threshold a little bit bigger. So these are options to your outlier. But what the outlier operator really did in the back end, I'm going to go back to the table view of it, is it calculated the server error count, and then it calculated an upper level, a lower level, an indicator violation, a mean, a standard deviation, and it's using all this to be able to give me what this ends up looking like, what are the standard deviations, and whether I have a violation in my standard deviation. So outlier is a fantastic way of identifying when stuff is happening that is outside of the norm. It's a great example for things that to alert on as well. Okay, so with that said, that's a little bit of advanced analytics. Usually we stop here, we try some hands-on labs. I would highly encourage you guys to try that as well. It's the tutorial that is off of the UI. But let's move on to the next one. So you analyze your data, you're now starting to use these operators, and you want to start monitoring this data. There's mainly 2 ways to do it. One is a dashboard and one's an alert. Dashboards allow you to see trends. Alerts allow you to notify of anything that's going on. So a dashboard is just a collection of panels. So if you see this picture in here, it's got a whole bunch of panels. Each one of those panels has a search behind it. And then you can drill into the query, or you can drill into other dashboards. So let me just show you that. Let's create a dashboard. Here is my query. Remember this query that I had built? It's as simple as saying add to dashboard. It's as simple as that. And it takes a name. So let's call this the count of 404s outlier. I'm going to give that as a name to my panel. And it's saying, what dashboard do you want to put this in? Do you want to put it in a dashboard that already exists? Here's a whole bunch of dashboards that already exist. Or perhaps I want to put this in a brand new dashboard. And if I do, I can just type away the name. So I'm going to call it the Apache Access dashboard, right? And it's going to create a new dashboard called the Apache Access dashboard. I'm just going to put it in my personal folder, click on add. And as you would expect, it just created a dashboard with 1 panel in it, because that's all that I put in there. How do I add more panels? Oh, it's simple as going and looking for what else you want to add. Click on add dashboard. It's going to give it the name of the panel, which I can change. And then I can go and say, I want to put it into my Apache, oops, what did I call it? Apache, oh, I thought it was Access dash. Oops, Apache Access dash. There we go. I'm going to add it to that dashboard, click on add, and it just adds another one to it as well. Now, keep in mind, not everything, oh, actually, let me add a 3rd one. Remember this one that came from another dashboard that I stole? This is the one that was showing 500s, and then I stole it and changed to 400s. Yeah, I'm going to add this one as well. I'm going to add this one to the same one, Apache, ooh, my goodness. I'm fat fingering everything today. Apache Access dash. All There it is. I'm going to add it to that one. Click on Add, and I just created a new dashboard with 3 panels. Here's one thing to keep in mind, though. Most likely than not, you are creating a dashboard that is going to be viewed by someone else. So you might want to clean it up a little bit. You might want to add some text panels and some title panels just to explain to people what you're looking at. So this is my first dashboard. Hopefully you'll have a little more interesting title than mine. But just for show, I'm gonna put that, and I can move it here to the top. I can enlarge it to go across the whole thing, and maybe I'm going to put a text panel as well. And in this case, it's going to be understanding your data, right? Because someone else might be reading this stuff, and then you can put some explanation of what is it that they're looking at. This is in Spanish, that's why you guys are having a hard time reading it. And then in here, I can add links to other dashboards if I wanted to as well, and click Submit. So there you go. Here is a little explanation of what people will be looking at. I can move this stuff around. Perhaps I want to make this one a little bit bigger so that it fits nicely in here. And you get the point. You just move stuff around as you need to as well here. And you can create your first dashboard just like that. Okay, so a couple of things that are available for you from a dashboard perspective. You can toggle it. So you saw dark theme before, and the ability to have a different theme. You can delete it, you can start, you can put it full screen, you can change the data access level. So you can say, I want people to view this dashboard with their own data access level if they have a restricted view, or I want them to share my data access level, meaning for this particular dashboard, I want them to see the production data that they normally don't have access to see, right? So you can change that data access from there as well. Other things that you can do, you can share this dashboard, and here's where we highly, highly suggest that you do. We can share this dashboard, again, just like you saw me share the query. You can share it with a whole role. You can share it with a very specific person in your organization. But this is how you would go about and share this dashboard with anybody in your org as well. You can let them know to be notified about this thing. You can even do things like this. You can share this dashboard outside of your organization, meaning perhaps you want to share it with anyone, even if they don't have access to Sumo. You're going to, if you share this link with them, they will be able to see the dashboard. That's a little bit dangerous. Maybe you have some data that you don't want to share with everyone. So you still want to give access to someone, but not someone who doesn't have access to Sumo. Let's say your VP wants to look at some dashboards, but they don't have a login. What you can do is you can make this dashboard accessible only to certain whitelisted IP addresses. Here's the link to the documentation on how to whitelist IP addresses, but you can do that as well. Share dashboards with other folks that have a whitelisted IP address as well. Okay, so remember, sharing is caring. Share as much as you can. And of course, the last thing that I'm going to show here is the ability to add filters. So you could say things like, I want this dashboard to only work for a particular source IP or for a particular status code, right? So you can use this as a template to tell folks, okay, enter IP in question. And then users of this dashboard, which you've shared with other folks, can come in here, enter the IP address that they want to follow for. And if they run that, all the dashboards would be reset to show data for that IP address. Of course, I don't have data for that IP address, so it's showing no data, but you get the point. You can go ahead and add that kind of stuff. And done editing. Last thing I want to show about dashboards is there's this thing called the live mode. If this dashboard is something that you're going to share with people because they need to enter a filter and run the query, then this dashboard does not need to be live. They're going to run it on a regular basis. But if you're going to be displaying this dashboard in your operations center, then nobody's going to be physically clicking to refresh it. And what you want to do is you want to set this dashboard to live mode so that it runs on the background. And for example, if it's 60 minutes worth of data, minute 61 is going to fall off, and then minute 1 is going to come in, and this dashboard is going to be continually refreshed out there. Okay, any questions so far? No? No questions. Let me talk about the last one. Again, try the labs. Let me try to talk about the last one, which is alerts. Alerts is pretty cool and pretty easy to set up. The mechanics are super simple. And let me walk you through an alert. As a matter of fact, I'm going to use this outlier example that I had here before. So remember this one that was looking at 404s? And I said, okay, if I ever get 404s that are out of the norm, it's going to show a little pink triangle. So what if I want to alert when I have something outside of the standard deviation? Well, if I look at the data, that little pink triangle is there when server error count violation is set to 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this field and I'm going to say I want to show only where that thing is greater than 0. So this is only going to show up if there's results greater than 0. If I don't have anything outside of violation, I'm not going to get any results. But if I ever get any results, that means that my server error count violation is greater than 0. You guys follow? Okay, so how do I schedule an alert? How do I set up an alert? What I do is I save my query, and part of saving that query gives me the ability to schedule it as a search. That means I want it to run on a regular basis. I can, by default, it says never because I just have it as a query. But I could say I want it to run real time, meaning run every second or two, every 15 minutes, every hour, every 2 hours. You can even do custom cron job. I want it to run on Mondays and Wednesdays from 2 to 7, or whatever the case might be, weekly and so on. I'm going to keep it simple and say I want to run it hourly, and I want to use this time zone, for example, and I want it to send me the following notification every time the search is complete, or probably more interesting, I want it to send me notification only if the following condition is met. In my case, remember the where clause I put in here? I want to say if the number of results is 0, don't send me an alert, because that means I had nothing outside of my outside of the threshold. But if the number of results is greater than 0, then I want you to email me, for example. And if you email me, you can send me the sumologic.com. You can send me the alert to this email address. Here is the email subject. By the way, I can change I can customize that email subject with some of these variables. I can include the query itself, the results set, a histogram. I can even include the results in a CSV attachment. Again, this is not meant to export all the results. This is just meant to send you an example of it as well. But this is how you go about setting up an alert. Pretty straightforward, right? And that's how you go about. Now, let me briefly talk, I know I'm running out of time, but let me briefly talk about the different alert types you have. Script action. What this allows me to do is it allows me to create a custom script of my choosing, whatever I want. Sumo has no idea what that script does. All it does is it calls that script and it runs it. For that, Sumo requires that the script sits somewhere where you have a collector so that we know how to go back and call that script. ServiceNow is just an integration with ServiceNow. ServiceNow is a ticketing system, kind of like Jira, and it allows Sumo to open a ticket in ServiceNow. We have documentation of what you have to do on both sides to get that going. Webhook is pretty straightforward. If you have a webhook, let's say you use Slack or PagerDuty or HipChat, we can do a webhook to just about anything that has a REST API, and we can send a message through webhook. And the last one here, save to index, gives me the ability to actually save this results back into an index of my choosing. So I can say I want to save it into an index called errors, and then that index would host all the results of all the alerts as it keeps running in there. All right, so pretty straightforward. That's how you go about creating your alerts. For those of you who will join tomorrow to the next session, we'll talk a little bit about creating meaningful alerts. So there's alerts and then there's alerts, right? There's good alerts and bad alerts, and what makes meaningful alerts, or alerts that reduce the noise that you get in the false positives. Last but not least, metrics. So you saw on the demo that I showed you how to monitor through metrics and then how to troubleshoot through logs. Well, keep in mind that you have the ability to overlay your logs and metrics. Remember, I did that. I was looking at my logs I'm sorry, I was looking at my metrics and then I was able to look at my logs that were relevant to that metric. So metrics help me monitor. They help me identify the what. Logs help me troubleshoot. They help me identify the why of that stuff. And I can do that through the overlay. And you must be wondering, what metrics can I bring in? Well, in short, there's three main types of metrics that we bring into Sumo. Host metrics, anything that is from your host, we can grab those metrics and bring them in, like that CPU and memory that you saw me look at. AWS metrics. So AWS sends all its metrics to CloudWatch, and we can then from CloudWatch grab all those AWS metrics straight into Sumo. And then the last one is if you have any Graphite compatible metrics, so collect D, StatsD, Drop Wizard, we can grab those Graphite formatted metrics straight into Sumo as well and view those within Sumo. And of course, as you saw in my demo, you get your panels in your dashboard can be made up of metrics, they can be made up of logs. So one same panel can have a combination of all those out there. Let me just go back to, let me go back to this panel in here. If you remember, I was showing you here a case where I have metrics on this panel, yet I have logs information down here on this panel in here, or even this one in here. So you can have a combination of that kind of stuff as you put it together. All right, so I've shown you quite a lot today. I've shown you how to go sort of from 0 to 60, creating a lot of the content. I've shown you how to get started. What I would highly recommend now is, as you start creating your data, keep an eye on that Learn tab. We post a lot of videos on very specific things. We have the tutorials, which I would highly recommend that you do, and more importantly, try the certification. You'll be highly surprised that you're well on your way with knowledge to be able to create a lot of that stuff in Sumo. So let me pause here for just a second and let me open it up to questions, and I'll stop the recording for now. Any questions?